Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous good guy dolls. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at the fourth film in the Chucky franchise, 1998's Bride of Chucky. Bride takes place shortly after Child's Play 3, when Chucky's former accomplice and lover, Tiffany, brings our favorite good guy back to life. They end up on a road trip with young lovers on the run, and what follows is a satirical, pop culture reference-filled, deadly adventure. After the rushed production of Child's Play 3, Mancini, Kirshner, and pretty much everyone decided the series was getting a little bit stale. They still wanted to take the story further, but they knew they needed to make it something different. It wasn't until the smashing success of Scream in 1996 that Mancini and Universal saw potential for a smarter, funnier, more violent Chucky to re-enter the spotlight. Mancini came up with the idea to give Chucky a love interest in order to bring out some sides in him that we hadn't already seen, and he got immediately working on a script. Kirshner and Mancini approached Ronnie Yu, who you may know from Freddy vs. Jason, to direct after being impressed by his 1993 debut, The Bride with the White Hair. He agreed on the conditions that he'd have lots of creative freedom and his collaborators Peter Pao and David Wu would also be able to work on the movie. The most important thing to figure out now was who's going to be Chucky's titular bride. Mancini says he actually wrote the original script with Jennifer Tilly in mind, and thank the mighty Dombala he was able to get her. Tiffany brings a much needed foil to Chucky and gives the series a breath of fresh air. The same can't be said for Bride's supposed protagonists, but I'll save my personal grievances for a bit later. Some great marketing and the long wait led to a lot of hype for Chucky's return, and Bride of Chucky earned $50 million at the worldwide box office, doubling its budget and becoming the highest grossing Child's Play film. Its response was mixed. It's generally considered a creative upgrade from Child's Play 3, but some didn't like the black comedy self-referential route it went in 4 movies in, or they think it was just done poorly. Others thought it was done masterfully, bringing Chucky back to the forefront of the horror genre and pop culture. That divisiveness has survived up until this day, as Bride of Chucky has 246s on Rotten Tomatoes. I was only 1 year old when this came out, but I remember being 5 or 6 or so, and it was this new version, the scarred up Chucky, that scared the absolute shit out of me. I remember enjoying Bride, but it has been a while since I last watched it. I wonder if it will live up to my childhood nostalgia. I suggest you don't watch this one in the bathtub, folks, because we're watching Bride of Chucky. The movie opens on a rainy night at a police evidence depository where items belonging to all of our favorite killers are being held. An officer named Bailey sneaks in and takes a garbage bag from one of the lockers. He makes a call to an ominous falsetto voice that can only belong to Tiffany, and he tells her to have his money ready. He gets bored waiting and decides to take a look in the bag. As he's peering in, his head gets pulled back and his throat is slit. As he bleeds out, we get to see our leading lady. She steals Bailey's lighter and says hello to Chucky's chopped up remains from the last movie. The opening credits play to Rob Zombie's Living Dead Girl as Tiffany heads home to her doll-filled trailer where she has lots of Charles Lee Ray related newspaper articles. She digs through her doll bodies to find the right pieces and crudely Frankensteins Chucky back together, giving him his iconic new look. Now it's time to meet the film's protagonists. Chief Warren Kincaid, played by John Ritter, answers the door to find David, his niece Jade's prom date. Warren learns that David is heading to Princeton to study theater on a figure skating scholarship as Jade heads down. Warren tells Jade he likes this boy much better than her last, and he thinks her dead parents would agree. The two head out and Warren makes a call. To nobody's surprise, Jade's real date, Jessie, hops out of the back seat and the two start sucking face. The fun doesn't last long though, as Officer Norton, aka Needlenose, pulls the kids over. Back at Tiffany's, a pentagram has been made and Chucky has been laid on top of it. With her handy-dandy Voodoo for Dummies book, Tiffany recites the incantation to bring Chucky back. But it doesn't seem to work. She gets a knock on the door from Damian, played by Alexis Arquette, who is Tiffany's current beau. Damian tries to impress Tiffany with a photo of one of his victims, but she quickly realizes it's just him in makeup. She makes fun of his murder virginity and notices Chucky isn't where she left him. She asks Damian to look under the couch for her lipstick, but to her disappointment, there is no lipstick and no Chucky, just Tiffany's spider, who Damian isn't a fan of. Damian pressures Tiffany to have sex, but Tiffany simply is not having it. That is until Chucky finally shows himself and Damian starts disrespecting the doll, calling him so 80s and giving him a couple of pumps. She handcuffs him to the bed and sets Chucky on him so they can have a threesome. She tells Damian that she and Chucky used to be lovers before he was killed, and he used to get so jealous when other men would even look at her, often murdering them. She says Chucky was the best she ever had, and Damian says he isn't big enough to handle her now, and...
Ain't the size that counts, asshole. It's what you do with it.
Chucky rips out Damian's face rings and starts suffocating him with a pillow. The two reunite, and Tiffany says it took her 10 years to find him. Chucky is glad to see she is still looking good, and Damian finally dies. We rejoin the teens, and Needlenose is giving them breathalyzers as Warren pulls up. Warren expresses his dislike for Jade, but says as long as he is stuck with her, she won't be dating some trailer trash like Jesse. And Warren announces he will use his position as police chief to do whatever he wants, and threatens to falsely arrest Jesse whenever he pleases. David tells Jesse he and Jade should get out of town and never look back. Tiff has made Swedish meatballs and prepared a nursery for their future baby. Apparently, the night Chucky died, Tiffany found this diamond ring on the mantle, and she assumed it was because Chuck wanted to propose, but that's not the case. He took it off a victim and was planning to pawn it. Chucky laughs at the idea of them getting married, and Tiffany realizes Chucky will never change. She distracts Chucky with some tickling and locks him in the playpen prison, and blows smoke at his fake half-ass proposal. She tells Chucky she's been a prisoner of her love for him, now it's his turn. As Chucky screams to be let out, Tiffany cries herself to sleep next to Damian's corpse. The next day we see Jesse as Tiffany's neighbor, and he struggles to carry the body-sized chest into Tiffany's trunk. He hears Chucky screaming and cursing, but she tells him she's just babysitting a potty-mouthed child. Tiffany tries to seduce the high school student, and we'll just assume he's 18 so it's less creepy, but he turns her down because he's seeing Jade. Tiffany does tell him to treat her right and never take her for granted. Chucky is making the most of his cell time when Tiffany comes in with a surprise. She says she agrees it's time Chucky settles down and gets married, and presents him with his bride. Tiffany leaves the newlyweds alone and takes a bath, where she is watching coverage about her latest killings and the Bride of Frankenstein. What she doesn't realize is she gave Chucky the perfect tool to cut himself out of the playpen. As Tiffany cries over the ironic movie choice, Chucky grabs a knife and drags his bride to the bathroom. Chucky bursts in, but Tiffany is able to give him a good kick, but to no avail as Chucky pushes her TV right into the tub, electrocuting her to death. Chucky likes the bubbles. Chucky wastes no time and gives a fierce rendition of the ritual, transferring Tiffany's soul into the doll. Tiffany's body pops up to scare Chucky, and the Tiffany doll springs to life. Chucky chucks the ring at her and says he's her best option at love now. Tiffany tries to figure out how to become human, but she has the master himself right there. But apparently since another person brought them back to life or transferred their souls, they can't simply swap out like Chucky could with Andy. They now need an amulet called the Heart of Damballa, which was buried with Chucky's corpse in Hackensack, New Jersey. All of this doesn't really work with the mythology of the first three movies, but I can get past it. Tiffany realizes they can't simply drive to New Jersey and freaks out, but quickly comes up with an idea. She calls up Jesse and offers him $500 to get the dolls to New Jersey by tomorrow. Jesse accepts if he can have $1,000, and Tiffany agrees. Tiffany ain't going to Hackensack looking like Raggedy Ann, and we get a fun montage of her getting a makeover, and even Chucky agrees she looks good. Jesse wonders why the dolls are being delivered to a cemetery, but fuck it, he's getting paid. David is at Jade's house consoling her and gives her the same advice he gave Jesse as he pulls up. Jesse gives Jade a sappy speech and asks her to marry him. He plans to leave town and start somewhere fresh with his whopping $1,000. Jade is hesitant but eventually says yes, and they go to pack her bags. Chucky gives the couple 6 months, but Tiffany loves this sappy shit. But Warren isn't a fan of sappy shit and calls Needlenose to tell him he is planting Jesse's van with weed. The dirty cop is very frustrated by these locked doors, and Chuck and Tiff don't like him screwing with their ride. Chucky pulls out his knife, which gets a snarky comment from Tiffany. Tiffany tells Chucky to think like Martha Stewart would and improvise, and she decides to take this kill into her own hands. Warren pries into the van and plants the weed under a cushion when he hears Tiffany giggle. He crawls his way up and is confused to find some dolls and some nails placed on the airbag. Tiffany jumps down and Chucky cuts a wire that sets off the airbag, launching the nails into Warren's face. Chucky reminisces on his time with Pinhead and admits it was a pretty good kill. The lovers come back out and the dolls rush to clean up the blood and hide Warren's body inside the seats in the back. They avoid getting caught and Chucky gets his hands on the weed. They quickly get pulled over by Needlenose and they pull over in front of some sort of stoner hangout spot. Jade asks and Needlenose confirms that Warren pays him extra to follow her around and starts laughing at her. Jade gets pissed and threatens to vaporize the officer and gives him a sort of punch to the face. Despite assaulting the officer, Jade goes to buy snacks for the road while Jesse talks to Needlenose and Chucky and Tiffany toke up. Needlenose starts snooping inside the van, and when he almost finds Warren's body, Chucky distracts him by throwing the weed. Needlenose throws Jesse against his hood but doesn't arrest him, I guess, opting to call Warren first. Chucky is tired of lollygagging and borrows Tiffany's stolen lighter. He grabs a shirt and crawls over to the police cruiser and sticks the shirt in the gas tank. He lights it up and crawls back, dropping the lighter on his way and flipping off a stoner. By the time Needlenose notices the fire, it's too late and he explodes, causing widespread panic. Jesse and Jade get the fuck out of there as people point at them as the culprits. There's already trouble in paradise as both of them think the other is responsible for the explosion, and both are so offended the other suspects them, but neither is willing to end this stupid escapade, I guess, and they get a call from David. They are all over the news and they are now suspected of killing 2 cops because Chucky dropped that lighter from the beginning. Plus, Warren is missing and presumed dead. This sets them both on even more edge, but again, not enough to turn themselves in and figure out this mess. They enter Niagara, and I didn't realize that the first half of Bride takes place in Canada. It's not a big deal, just a bit odd. Jesse, for absolutely no good reason, decides this is the perfect time to get hitched and stops at a 24/7 chapel. They head inside and Tiffany plots to steal their bodies. These 2 idiots each nervously marry who they believe to be a murderer, while Chucky complains about 90s music and rocks out to some white zombie. Tiffany talks about her dream wedding and Chucky genuinely apologizes for the way he treated her. The 2 laugh at their ridiculous situation and not-so-dead Warren bursts out of the back seat. He tries to get away, and as the groom kisses the bride, Chucky stabs Warren to death. They stop at a seedy, honeymoon-themed motel, and for some reason, brought the dolls inside as they watch the news about themselves. This weird couple wanders into their room, and the wife isn't too big on Chucky. The husband, Ross, distracts them while Diane steals Jesse's wallet, but eagle-eyed Tiffany sees. The con artist couple try to seduce the teenagers but are turned down, and Tiffany plots revenge. Ross and Diane start to get freaky as the door creaks open. Tiffany grabs a bottle of champagne, and by the time Diane sees her in the ceiling mirror, it's too late. Tiffany hurls up the bottle, smashing the ceiling and raining glass down, killing them and their waterbed. That tips the scale and Chucky confesses his love to Tiffany and removes the ring from Diane's severed finger to properly propose to her. Tiffany starts crying with joy, and that gives them the idea that all the pipes must be working, and the dolls have a steamy makeout sesh and silhouetted sex scene. Romance is not in the air next door, and when Jesse heads outside, Jade calls David. She tells David she thinks he is the murderer, but can't go to the police because she still loves him. David has another call coming in, and what do you know, it's Jesse, who also thinks Jade is the killer. He also tells him to go to the police, but we know they won't. That morning, housekeeping comes inside and finds the beautiful remains of Ross and Diane, and again, Jesse and Jade get the fuck out of there. These 2 morons accuse each other some more until they are surprised by David. The only voice of reason in this movie explains why he thinks they are both just confused and wrong about the other, and convinces them it is some sort of terrible misunderstanding. He even suggests Warren may be the psychopath, but gets distracted by the smell of his body. He spots some blood and uncovers Warren's body. Suddenly terrified, he grabs Warren's gun and demands they stop the van. David shows them the body and hops out, getting the attention of an officer, and Chucky and Tiffany finally reveal themselves with the guns they stole from Ross and Diane. David backs away right in front of a semi-truck that smashes him to pieces. The dolls have Jesse drive away, and Chucky is able to stop the police from following them as they enter New Jersey. Jesse and Jade already know who Chucky is, and Jesse is surprised to see Tiffany as a doll. Jesse asks how all this happened.
If it was a movie, it would take 3 or 4 sequels just to do it justice.
The dolls also tell them they plan to steal their bodies, and the radio says that Charles Lee Ray's fingerprints have been found at multiple crime scenes, and his body is to be exhumed later today. Some time passes and they have stolen an RV from this poor couple, and Chucky and Tiffany are playing house. Tiffany has made meatballs and cookies, and Chucky talks about how much he loves marriage. But Jesse points out that Tiffany has a lot of dishes piling up, which Chucky then points out to Tiffany. Jade tells Tiffany the least he could do after she made dinner is do the dishes, and now Tiffany is properly pissed off. She starts hurling dishes and straight up roasts Chucky and his little doll dick. Chucky throws some shade and a cookie back, and Jade uses this chaos to knock Tiffany into the oven. Chucky shoots at her, but Jesse knocks him through the window and the RV goes off-road. The still-tied Jade wakes up and the now crispy Tiffany jumps out of the oven and attacks her. Jesse wakes up and throws her and unties Jade and gets her out of the RV, but she is taken by a still gun-toting Chucky. Jesse jumps out of the RV just before it explodes and grabs Tiffany before she can reach her gun. He grabs her and follows Chucky and Jade to the cemetery. Chucky kills the poor unsuspecting guy exhuming his body and sends Jade down into the grave. She breaks his neck retrieving the heart of Damballa, and Chucky and Jesse have a standoff. They agree on a trade, and a very sad Tiffany tells Jade she's lucky as they pass each other, and our least favorite young lovers reunite. Continuing their consistent stupidity, they decide hugging would be better than running, and Chucky hurls his knife, stabbing Jesse in the back. Then Jade pulls the knife out and gives it right back to Chucky. Chucky ties the two up and begins the ritual, and Tiffany tells Chucky she loves him and goes in for a kiss. She sneakily pulls the knife from his pocket and stabs him in the back. Chucky asks why, and citing Bride of Frankenstein, she tells him they belong dead. She says she'll see him in hell, and Chucky seemingly dies. Jesse and Jade free themselves just in time to watch an all-out doll fight. They battle with shovels and hands, and Chucky eventually gives her a good stab. Tiffany quotes her mother one last time, and Chucky slides her off his knife. But then Jesse smacks him with a shovel right into his own grave. He pulls the ladder away and Chucky demands to be let out as that police chief from TV shows up. He is obviously surprised by the sight of Chucky, and Jade snatches his gun. Chucky tells her to go ahead and shoot as he will come back just like he always does. She gives him 6 shots to the chest and he slides down next to his skeleton, killing him a bit easier than usual this time around. The police chief answers a phone call and says Jesse and Jade weren't the killers. Then he just lets them go home? No hospital? No questioning? They live in Canada and don't have a car? Ah, whatever. He looks over Tiffany's body when she suddenly jolts back to life. She writhes in pain as she gives birth to this squealing little treasure, which promptly kills the chief to end the movie and ensure a bizarre sequel. And that's Bride of Chucky. It is an interesting piece of cinema. It is so of its time. A lot of different horror movies and franchises tried to go the meta route after Scream, but I would say Bride of Chucky is one of the most successful at it. Sure, it's got some tongue-in-cheek quips, and not all of the jokes would land as well today as they would in the 90s, but it's generally a smart movie. It obviously has this fun mirroring of Bride of Frankenstein, with Tiffany creating her own monster to love, but then Chucky redoes it with the bathtub scene, and the ending with Tiffany deciding they are better off dead. But it also plays out a lot like a romantic comedy, which is mostly a lot of fun. The violence against human victims is definitely amped up in Bride, but it's still arguably the least scary in the series thus far. But it isn't trying to be a straight up horror, it's got a mix of black comedy, romance, and then the slasher aspect. The script is miles ahead of part 3, and we finally get to know Chucky a bit, who before this was cracking jokes and stuff, but he didn't really have a personality beyond being crude and vicious. Tiffany is a fantastic foil for Chucky and vice versa. It's such an absurd premise to give a modern horror icon a love interest, and Chucky is one of the very few that it would work with. Brad Dourif's voice performance is my favorite thus far. His more reserved lines, like when he is first interacting with Tiffany, are really funny to hear from this fucked up looking doll, and Jennifer Tilly's angelic voice was made to be put in a killer doll. But I don't love everything about Bride. The absolute worst part of the movie is Jesse and Jade. The characters are just so difficult to like, and that's at least partially by design, but it doesn't make me hate them less. They are both just so aggravating, I never find myself rooting for them. But the movie has enough moving pieces for me to enjoy it despite them. It also does something pretty impressive in that it makes this relatively slow movie seem pretty fast-paced. Needlenose doesn't die until 48 minutes in, which is what kicks off the trip to New Jersey, but I'm never bored waiting for things to happen before then. It's a much more dialogue and relationship-based film, and that just tells me that Mancini was able to really step up his game since the previous films. Some people aren't big on the Chucky redesign, but I'm personally a fan, and the doll animatronic movements look better than ever thanks to the always wonderful Kevin Yeager. Bride is also the best looking Chucky film at this point. It brings such a distinct style. It's also notably a bit of an LGBTQ movie. David is gay and is by far the smartest, most likable person in the movie, and his sexuality is never used in an exploitative way, it's just part of who he is. Not to mention Damian's character being played by Alexis Arquette, the late transgender actress and activist. This is notable because Don Mancini was one of the earlier openly gay directors and writers in horror. Things like gender and sexuality were obviously explored in film before 1998, but it was still pretty uncommon in the horror genre. This of course is going to roll into the next film of the series, but that's next week. Bride doesn't feel quite as grandiose as its predecessors. The doll fight is cool, but I think Chucky dies a bit too easily, especially compared to his previous gruesome deaths. But there are a lot of fun, inventive deaths throughout. I'm glad Tiffany was able to keep up, if not top Chucky in the killings. All in all, I don't have many bad things to say about Bride. It took the series down a whole new route, but it was able to successfully bring Chucky back from what seemed like his end in movies. It's super meta and not super scary, so I imagine there's some people who love it and some people who hate it. I personally consider it a bit of a guilty pleasure. Well, that's about it. Next week we'll be looking at everyone's favorite, Seed of Chucky. As always, I'm Noah Hook and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Bride of Chucky. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of my Chucky content. And if you want to support the channel further, please go check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to request specific movies for me to review and vote on polls to decide future franchises I cover. Thanks y'all.